And
Great work.
we're waiting for our live feed to get. We're good? All right, again, I'd like to call tonight's meeting of the Town of Pompey Planning Board. Oh, come on in, right?
Apologize.
No, come on in, we're just starting. See.
Go ahead. Should let you get it.
We're standing, we're anticipating what you're gonna say next. Good slide. Don't have a flag.
Okay. All right, well, since all some are standing, let's all stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to start first by introducing myself. I'm Sue Smith, Chairman of the Planning Board. To my far right, John Shaheen, Evan Corson, Secretary Sarah LaJudas. My left, Carl Fahrenkrug, Dan Vargas, and Roy Smith. Kids on board, our town engineer is John Dunkel. Our town attorney is Jamie Sutton. And in the back is our codes enforcement officer, Tim Barrett. So I'd like to welcome everybody to our meeting tonight. I apologize that our agenda was not out in a more timely fashion. There is only one item on our agenda tonight. But first, I'd like to refer to our meeting minutes from June 19th. I know that there have been a couple of misspellings corrections submitted by two of our board members, John and Carl. Were there any other in the boards?
This one minor one, I can let it slide.
Your name?
Yeah. Just on one.
Thank you. Okay.
That's sensitive.
That's okay. That's good if it's just that. All right, with that, I'll make a motion to approve as amended.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Kevin. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So our agenda for this evening is Pivot Energy. This is referring to an initial site plan review and proposed construction of a community solar project, or what Town of Pompey was referred to as a tier 3. On Sweet Road, the tax ID of the property is 012-01-03.1. For this application, this is the first time the company Pivot is presenting. Gordon.
Yes.
Gentlemen, come up, introduce yourselves.
Yep.
Speak to the board. I see you have a lot of diagrams, pictures to refer to also. And speak clearly and go from there.
All right. So again, my name is Gordon Woodcock. You know, we are familiar with each other. Probably 2 years ago, came before you for a project located on this parcel on Sweet Road. And so we're submitting a project on the same parcel, but we've made significant revisions. I'm also here with Hyde Clark from Young Summer, Jake Runner from EDR, Civil and Environmental Consultant, and the landowner, Mr. Bill Osakowski. And so throughout the process, we've heard feedback from both the planning board, the ECC, the town board, and other stakeholders in an open house. And we've taken that information and adjusted the project, made revisions. So this is a new project, and that's why we're coming back before you. The most significant changes are shifting the project to the west on the parcel. to both minimize impact on the cleared agricultural land. Again, this parcel was cleared by our landowner probably about 12 years ago and then formerly used in hay and corn. And then a couple of years ago, we started discussions with them around a solar project, felt it was a good use for the property. But in any case, we did hear the feedback that, hey, let's try and get it off of the agricultural land as much as possible. So it's been shifted to the west some. We've also talked with our landowner, Mr. Osikowski, about getting a deed restriction on adjacent property that would set aside equivalent acreage, both in size and in quality of soils, and a deed restricted agricultural easement. So if we're taking 20 acres out of rotation on this project, there'd be 20 acres on a deed restriction that would be an agricultural easement. This is something that's very common in some of the larger scale utility projects like that are occupying hundreds and hundreds of acres. You don't usually see it on a community scale project occupying 20 acres. But again, we do understand the town's concerns and are trying to address them with that agricultural easement. Additionally, there's been roads and screening on the adjacent property line to minimize visual impacts of the property. We've gone through the notice of intent process with Ag and Markets to get their feedback on what we're proposing. And they've acknowledged that the project is not going to have impacts on agricultural resources in the town, in the county, in the state, as long as we follow the best practices, the construction guidelines for solar projects on farmland, which is standard practice for our company. We'd plant the array area with pollinator-friendly habitat, which I'm sure you've seen news reports recently about how pollinators are under significant pressure from residential development, commercial development, pesticides, climate change. And so setting aside 20 acres in pollinator habitat is a significant benefit to those insects and animals that use pollination to help us and help themselves. We'd also, of course, follow sheep grazing here, which is an industry standard in the state. It's something that we take very seriously. We work with a company called United Agrivoltaics out of Tompkins County. They're United Agrivoltaics. They handle all of our grazing operations across the state and work with local and regional grazers to provide vegetation management on site. And those are some of the key points as far as what changes have been made. The project itself occupies about 22 acres of fenced area on the 95-acre parcel. It is zoned agricultural, and we do have interconnection approval from National Grid to tie into the three-phase line out on Sweet Road that will backfeed to the Southwood sub. That's the project introduction. Happy to take any questions that you may have.
Overlay what the prior project was as compared to this project?
We don't have that on here. It'd make it a little difficult to see, but it did formally basically adhere to the setbacks. The town mandated setback was considerably closer to the road and the adjacent landowner. So we pushed it as far to the west as we can, while respecting the wetland boundaries that are within that tree line, and also allowing for the topography, which gets pretty deep as you get into the tree line over there.
Was this gonna be a 2 megawatt? Station
It's rated at 4.25 megawatts.
at peak?
Yes.
So basically the difference in your layout on the larger field to the south, it's pushed back away from Sweet Road.
That's right.
You'd be taking out some of the trees in the tree line,
Yes.
more so in this versus before, correct?
Yeah, we've been pushing it over to the tree line as much as we can before it really starts to fall off. And then, for grading in that area, all of a sudden you start impacting the wetlands and the stream bed and everything over there. Yeah.
But to me, the bigger difference is the hayfield to the north.
Yeah, this area up here.
There's a lot more coverage in this application than the last one.
Yeah, and that does pull it away from this area.
From there, but I know as I have driven down going southbound on Sweet Road, that first field is even more visible, I think. So, but other than that, my other thing is that on this one, now there's 2 access points in there as opposed to just one road before.
That's right. Because of the layout getting separated, we could run an access road through the property if that was preferred, but we're trying to minimize the disruption to the array area. But you're right, we could have an access road coming in and coming south. This access road is actually, this was a layout that was done before the open house. At the open house, one of the landowners to the south here said that they wanted to see the access road coming in straight across from Sweet Road. So that's the change that we've also
Which
made.
is admirable to take in the neighboring landowner, but it is in direct conflict to what Ag and Markets suggests of keeping like what remains of that field that could be farmed. You are definitely chopping that up and eliminating that then.
Which, if we keep the road at grade so that plow can run over it, believe that it could still use both sides of the parcel, even with a road going through it, both sides of that field. It wouldn't be raised up above grade, it would be.
No, I get that. I know in other solar instances, something like that is what they would call a pinch land because of the size of a lot of your farm implements and so on, trying to negotiate with smaller pieces, nooks, crannies, and so on. Now it's a lot tougher.
Mhm.
I do want to make a point, and this is to everyone, when they talk about farmland, it's not, the state isn't referring to, are we planting corn on it? Are we planting hay on it? It's soil type. Okay, soil type is not something you can easily, you can't go out and change it. So this earth only gave us so much of this prime farmland. And we can't change it. So that's your most efficient soil type out there for anybody in agriculture to use. To get your least inputs into it and your most outputs back out of it on your prime farm soils. So I just want to make a clarification, everybody. It's easy to talk about farmland, yes. And I give Bill credit that years ago that this land, yeah, it used to be scrub and it was cleared and it has been farmed. It was the same soil type all along. Okay, and I just want to make that clarification that anytime with any of these, our code says 50% of the parcel of farm soils could be used for solar. New York Ag and Markets is pretty specific with their siting goals that farm soils, whether it was active rotational, permanent hayland, improved pasture, unimproved pasture, the list goes on, that their preference is avoid this.
There are also soils that meet the definition that have housing developments on that soil.
Understood?
Just to be clear, it's not,
Understood.
right, we
But
have
that's,
subdivisions built on those same soils.
and we're losing it at a larger pace as time goes on too.
And those are not recoverable, whereas I know we've been through this, not with just
Yeah.
this project, but with other projects, right? There's a decommissioning in place that removes the system and returns it to agricultural use at the end of life. And the other component I do want to underscore is that agricultural lands that we're respecting, that we need to set aside acreage in equivalent size and quality. The prime soils are directly referencing.
Explain that a little more to me. Is that like a neighboring parcel?
Yeah, Mr. Ozakowski owns some land to the west of this site where we'd set aside, if it was 20 acres, we'd set aside 20 acres to ensure that for the next 25 years, if a farmer was looking to lease land to utilize, it would be there.
Decommissioning. How many have you decommissioned?
How many have we decommissioned?
Yeah.
We have not had to decommission any full systems yet at all, fortunately. They're talking about 25-year lifetimes. Pivot's been installing projects for about 13 years now. We have not had to fully decommission any There have been some instances where panels have been damaged or they're not performing at full output, so they're a warranty reclaim because the panels are warranted to put out so much power every year for the next 25 years. In those instances, we've actually repurposed the modules and donated them to Habitat for Humanity Home, other nonprofits that can utilize the panels that aren't concerned about max power output.
Realizing on your proposal, the increased amount of tree lines, like around Stacers and neighbors and so on. Those trees get planted, they staying there, or they get pulled out?
At decommissioning, I think that's something that is where you would absolutely be flexible on it. People wanted to log that area for firewood, that's fine. I mean, at that point, there would be mature, healthy trees. It really does depend on what the town stipulated and wanted to see there. Just like with fencing, sometimes with decommissioning, you might want to leave the fence for subsequent use. If somebody wanted to use it as ranch or grazing area post-project, you might want to leave the fencing there.
The sheep. United Agrivoltaics,
Mhm.
so who's actually the herdsman? Who's taking care?
Well, of each site,
Oh, like in this case, it's landowner or contract?
it would be contracted to a grazing operation. So Caleb Scott is the proprietor of United Agrivoltaics, and then he works with grazers around the state to put contracts together and make sure that he has the herd needed to manage the site.
So what was the thought process to move the array to utilize that northern field rather than the field to the south of Stacer's property there as you had originally proposed?
Well, sure. Recognizing this is a residential property where they have a pool and this side of the parcel, it seemed like this was more visually sensitive. On the north side of the parcel, of course, he has a commercial paving business, and that's not, it's arguably as sensitive an area. Additionally, after further consultation with Bill, he said this area still gets pretty wet. I guess, is that right? DOT added a culvert over here that is draining onto the property. So, it's not the highest quality from a farming standpoint.
Yeah, I did notice that some of the soils over there are of statewide significance, but not prime farmland.
Mhm.
Right.
John, you don't see anything significant about the location? Set of arrays?
Well, we'd have to look at, the stormwater management requirements,
Since it's a wood area.
the changes to cover. It's likely would have on the other, one. So to look at the same.
So since it's wet, what are the plans for stormwater and?
Well, as your engineer said, do a thorough stormwater analysis and make sure that the appropriate controls are in place.
One thing to be aware of with sheep grazing, that there should be some grazing plan that's approved as considered as part of this, so that you don't get overgrazing and really compact the soils and change the whole character, which I've seen happen. The way to graze that sheep are brought in and they're rotated through the area a couple of times a year, which is fine, but if they're there permanently, and you change meadow to pasture, that changes the runoff characteristics and it changes stormwater.
Right, and they would not be on site full time. It
Right.
would be rotated through. The intent is to provide additional revenue for the grazing operation and then benefits us because it's actually is cost effective and it adheres to our company mission. And it gives the grazers additional acreage so that they can rotate their herd through.
That should just be something that's reviewed as part of the operating plan. Yeah, when we get to that point.
Yeah.
What's the total square footage of the array itself?
I mean, the fenced area is 22.1 acres. What is that? 40,000 square feet the acre. So you can do the math here. 900,000 square feet. That's the fenced area. I mean, if you're talking about panels, it would be a little bit smaller.
It's like 50% of the area.
Yeah, that's right. Approximately like what's the actual panel coverage? I think what we call the ground cover ratios, maybe 0.35, 0.4. So yeah, close to what you're saying.
Tell me a little bit more about the set aside that you're planning and you mean by that?
We would have a deed restriction on the acreage that locks it in an agricultural easement for the life of the project.
An agricultural easement,
Well, just a deed restriction so that the property needs to be dedicated to agricultural use.
only be used for agricultural.
That's a parcel the same size as the array.
It would be acreage equivalent to
Yep.
size and quality, right?
But on another parcel,
Not on this parcel.
right?
Right.
Do you know where?
Yeah, as I said, Mr. Scalzi has a parcel,
Oh.
so just to the west.
It's still, yeah, it's still.
It's in Pompey, it's in the town of Pompey, it's really very nearby.
So it wouldn't be able to be sold for housing development or.
Right.
Right. For the life of the project.
For the life of the project. At that point, right, the project's removed, the agricultural land's available again.
So help me with, because so much of this is new to us, which like the question, have you taken one down yet? It's still early in the game, take one down. At that 25-year point, that's the expected life of the panels.
That's the warranted life of the panel. It's the contractual term with the utility. I mean, honestly, the useful life of the panels could extend well beyond that.
Which is my question. So is it possible at that 25-year point, new contracts get negotiated and it stays right there?
Yes, yeah, it is possible.
Forward.
Yeah.
And that would be the landowner, the power company.
Right. At that point, it's really speculative to say what the energy markets are like, right? The community solar may or may not be existing anymore at that point. So it's really hard to say
Yeah.
what the environment would be like.
You need to come.
How often is it that panels would have to be changed out?
I don't have a hard number for like one in every 100,000, right? That's what it would be. You might see some panels that are underproducing, for example, that you would argue would be a warranty claim,
So
but
you have like an MTVF study?
right. Something, I don't have that, but that's essentially you'd be talking with the module manufacturer to get a number like that from them.
Is that something? that-
Carl, what is that acronym you use?
Mean time between failures, MTVF.
Oh,
Engineering, that's what they, especially electrical, they do use that a lot. It would give you in theory, it'd give you a statistical, evaluation of how often something's gonna fail.
Hmm.
And usually use that, weigh costs and other factors.
well, you've experienced some limited, not failures, but weaknesses, and you
Sure.
just repurpose those panels. They're just
Right,
pop one out, pop one in.
right.
Right, pretty simple.
And ideally repurpose them somewhere else.
So in the installation of this, putting in the, foundations and such, where does that labor come from?
Well, year to year, it depends. Typically, we're gonna work with the general contractor in New York, and then they'll source local and regional labor for civil, electrical. It really does depend on the labor pool and who's available.
Okay. And the maintenance of the arrays, that who's responsible for that?
So we do have an internal construction management team, right, that works with the generals. We have an internal operations and management team that works with United Agrivoltaics, in addition to service and maintenance staff that come check on the system, or if we see something on data monitoring where it doesn't look like they're contracted to come out and look as well.
Where the sheep aren't doing enough to keep the weeds down or,
Right, if there's woody vegetation, something that's not palatable to them,
yeah.
you have to come out and maintain that through mechanical means.
So that would be an inspection. What's the? Is there a routine inspection? They come out monthly, semi-monthly?
Well, the grazing, like John was alluding to, there's a,
Forget the grazing.
yeah, no, I just mean that, you have the rotational grazing period where that is one part of it. The grazing operation is part of a visual inspection. They're trained to come out, and if they see something that doesn't look right, let us know. But then we have quarterly service inspections that are
Okay, so it's a
electrical and focus, yeah.
quarterly inspection regardless of whether or not you're getting any special messages.
Right.
So do panels need to be like reach compliant or anything like that?
Carl, what does that mean?
It's a regulation that deals with materials that go into electronics. It has to do with hazardous materials.
Yeah, like all your cell phones, your computers, everything has to,
Yeah.
ROS, is it ROS compliant?
RoHS, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's various different ones. So the Europeans use one of the standards a lot, and my concern obviously would be what are the materials that are in the panels and leaching and disposal and the ability to replace panels. That type of thing.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, what's the question? Are they ROS compliant?
Well, are there standards like that that have?
There are, there's of course UL standards that specify the weather resistance and hail resistance. There are ROS compliance as well. I'd have to look at the modules, for example, that we are using this year on projects, and I could send you them as an example for certification.
Is that something we could get a copy
Yeah,
of?
absolutely.
I think that comes with the information on the project. Sue and I both have solar arrays. John does also, that
I would think it would
have
be.
the information, the UL approvals and all that. And our panels unplug, pop out, and a new one pops in.
In one of the prior meetings, we had talked about what the materials were there.
Mhm.
That would be one way to be able to see what that is.
Yeah. And there are some exotic components that are only available in certain areas to
Yeah.
manufacture these panels. Do you know where yours are manufactured? Canada or?
It does depend year to year.
Yep.
In the previous year, projects were coming from Korea.
Mhm.
So a lot of the modules are coming from Asian nations, Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia. There's concern about panels coming from China. We're actually concerned about that as well and actively source against material coming out of China because of some of the human rights abuses and, yeah.
I think mine came from Canada, but I don't know where Canada got them.
Was it Canadian Solar?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a Canadian company, but anyway. it's
Yeah.
a long time ago.
Pretty much all the cells are manufactured overseas. though.
Right.
And then are assembled here or Canada or.
Yeah.
Right, but of course, what we are seeing is significant ramp up in manufacturing in
Right.
American states.
Yeah.
It's a year or two out, but there's some really notable investments being made in American manufacturing.
I mean, it's the reason that Texas didn't have a big power outage with this recent heat wave is they had significant solar in place that kept the power grid operating.
Yeah, I saw that.
Their last disaster.
Yeah.
What's that? The last debacle. So yeah, they had enough solar in place that they prevented that power outage.
Yeah,
It's been 115 degrees and ridiculous temperatures.
yeah.
So
They've made it hard on themselves because they can't easily import power from other,
correct. That the way their grid is set up.
yeah.
But now with enough solar to help that demand seem to work out.
Yeah,
Gordon, I'll be honest, a little disappointed that the exact same parcel, because one thing brought up last time around is the view shed and scenic corridor that through our master plan that we're supposed to be aware of and so on. You see this map that just about that entire parcel is within,
Yeah,
should be protected.
and it's, I think,
And I'll touch on this, and again, the master plan, this is the strategy for alternative energy. And it says that alternative energy technology is promoted. And, you know, like Kevin said, you know, I have solar. It's on our barn. Evan, John, I'm not sure if I do, Deb does too. I think it's great. In the right place.
Sure.
But it does say that technology promoted and utilized to reduce the energy cost while not infringing on ag interests, established view sheds, residential interests, or the environment. So it's something I think we do need to also consider and balance.
no, I agree. I also feel that we really need projects like this. They do make a significant contribution to the power grid in New York State. And it does take a mix of residential, commercial installations, community installations, and some of those utility scale projects you see going in occupying hundreds and thousands of acres.
Didn't we take into account the view shed the last time and there was,
Yeah, so, right, there's the macro and then I suppose the micro.
right,
But for lack of a better description of it. And, you know, I also want to highlight, hey, Pompey's got limited three-phase distribution. So, you know, there's all these factors that we're trying to navigate and negotiate to find a good site and balance out all these concerns. Jake, I mean, do you want to speak to the view shed analysis a little bit?
I can. So, you know, one thing like Gordon touched on is the macro factor, right? Which is what is the visibility within a mile or so of the project? Because you're in the environment around there. And, you know, as you can tell on this map, it's fairly limited to, you know, the project itself and the adjacent agricultural fields. And there's natural screening around the project. And then you talk about the micro scale, right? Which is, you know, as you were talking about, Sue, driving south on Sweet Road, right? And coming across that project at 55, 60 miles an hour. Mostly, you know, people are cooking along at a pretty good clip. So, you know, the existing vegetation that's around there does a pretty good job of screening those fields. And then I think with the addition of screening put in place, that'll kind of really help limit. So the screening's targeted for the adjacent residential property. And if we think about it in a macro scale, moving back out, there's very limited residential development around this project, right? There's more or less 2 residences. And I think from the projects that I've seen across the state, that's about as small as you're ever going to get. Especially the, Gordon touched on the 3-phase line and needing to be able to connect into the line and keeping that distance from that connection is, you know, needs to be pretty short. So, you know, adding the screening in and targeted locations, both for the residential, but also as you're driving south on Sweet Road, you know, you have that first field, the kind of, you know, commercial operation, that residential, and then there's that gap. And that's more screening put into that as well. So when you're driving down, that view out of those fields will be screened as well. And then on your return, you know, you're really kind of blocked, you know, by the hedgerow. And your view is a little bit more forward than it is off to the side because you have kind of the screening in the fields over here that open up and naturally your eyes are pulled that way.
so off of the view shed for a second here. Explain to me specifically what we mean when we say community solar, how that works.
Sure. So New York has 2 programs right now that are in that community solar vein. One's low to moderate income subscribers. So your project has to have qualified people that really could benefit financially from a project like this. A significant percentage of your product needs to have those subscribers. The other option is what's called remote crediting. And that is typically focused on commercial, municipal, you know, larger energy users. So what we routinely see on those projects dairy farms, school districts, larger energy users. But the dairy farms specifically can really benefit that because they're using thousands and thousands of kilowatt hours.
So let me,
That's leader.
That, right, it's all a community solar project that's being compensated at the value of distributed energy resource, the VEDAR rate. But the subscription models, meaning who can sign up to benefit from those projects, there's two options there.
so what is this specific model? What,
We are open to discussion. We remote crediting, or, I saw recently that where the town of Lafayette signed up municipal members, the municipal buildings as well as town people, I think, to the array to get
so how does that work? So I want to be involved in community solar.
yeah.
There's a cost to me, or I just sign up? How does it actually work?
There's just the activation cost, the energy you spend, time and effort you spend subscribing. But other than that, no, there's a discount on your energy bill.
Okay.
And you can really sign up anytime to any projects. There can be specific subscriptions, like if a town or a municipal entity wants to sign up and be a part of a facility, or it could just be more general, where I'm a National Grid customer, for example, I want to sign up and get a bill discount. So it depends.
So like I'm able to sign up with other providers because National Grid just delivers power. They don't provide any power.
Right, the supply and distribution are.
Right. So I want to sign up for this. Like someone in Lafayette or the town of Pompey wants to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
I pay a fee to be a subscriber?
No, there's not a fee, right? That's the
I
intent is
just
to,
sign on as a subscriber.
right, and there may be a waiting period for a project to come online or for there to be available capacity.
Because there's only so many subscribers that can subscribe to this size.
Sure. You try to allocate 100% of the annual energy production to a fixed subscriber and,
Right.
they can come and go, but it depends.
And typically would be within the town.
It can be, but it's really more regional.
Yep.
So for example, we have a project over in Oneida County in the town of Verona, and there we've got majority of offtake coming from like Oneida County and Madison County. But there's some people scattered about.
But they have to be within National Grid too.
Right, they have to be a utility, that serving utility customer. So you couldn't have a NICEAG customer going to National Grid or.
Like for instance, in my situation, I don't pay for any electricity. I pay $17 a month to be hooked up to the grid.
Mhm,
I make enough power that covers that $17 cost throughout the year.
mhm.
Because at the end of the year, April, I think I get the excess energy that I've created, I get that back as a
Right.
credit.
Right.
So I don't pay for any electricity throughout the year. So if short of that, if I signed up for this, am I in that same sort of boat?
Yes, well, you're not getting energy for free, you're getting a discount on your energy.
Discount. Any idea?
10% typically average, the low to moderate income, your project gets graded
Okay,
on how deep of a discount you provide. There's just some limits to how much of a discount you can provide before all of a sudden your project's not.
Yep.
Not profitable, or not viable. But
yeah, we have a employee that lives in Nelson, and Nelson, the town of Nelson had a project where the town of Nelson is buying the power. And so everybody gets a discount. Not sure where they're buying it from or whether it's from solar or whatever. And that's Madison County, a different county. But probably a similar type of situation. So
Yeah.
paying less for our energy.
Yeah, and it is best if you can own a system and host it on your property and really get that local use where your loads are being fed by renewable energy. And like you say, you're zeroing out your bill. But a lot of people can't. They don't have the,
Enough, right?
they don't have the land for it. They don't have the tax liability for it. For whatever reason, there are a lot of people out there that just can't, which is why we need projects like this.
Yeah.
But it is a case, I think some people, they hear community and they think that what is generated from this goes directly into the line right to their house. It goes to a Southwood plant substation and then distributed.
Well, I think the Southwood subs up here, if my memory's right. So, really what happens, electricity is like water. Once it gets out on this line, it's going wherever it can. If somebody turns on their air conditioner, that energy on a hot day is supplying that load. If nobody's using electricity, right, it goes all the way back to the sub and then from there it gets distributed out.
But it really is the
That
paper.
is consistent with what's on the local lines that's feeding.
Right, so, but it's really it's a paper issue. In other words, like during the day, I'm making power and I'm throwing it into the grid.
Yeah,
I have no idea whether Mrs. Jones is getting it or somebody else. But on paper, the discount comes that you're getting that discount because you're in that community solar project or you have whatever. So that's really a billing sort of paper issue. That 10% doesn't fluctuate because the sun's out or the sun's not out.
right. It's
Correct.
you're getting credited with 1,000 kilowatt hours. Let's say that normally would cost you $100. It's only going to cost you $90 or whatever it is. But yeah, you know, you're getting credited as providing benefit to the grid and supplying energy to your neighbors and local users. And this is doing something similar just on a larger scale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So technically, if there were enough subscribers in the town of Pompey, they would all be able to take advantage of that or town hall
Right,
here
right,
would be able to get a discount for our power usage.
right. And if we were signing up residential subscribers, we would preferentially focus on low to moderate income first. We would want to allocate as many of those households to the project as possible,
So for how long do they get the discount?
as long as they remain a subscriber. So the life of the project, that's
Right, just like if you signed up for a different provider other than National Grid, same deal, you could change that if you wanted to at some time. You know, with the fire department here, they could take advantage of it. Yeah, so.
New York State ran a project in the nineties where they basically allowed discounts and then after some point in time, you had to pay more. And basically the power company, the people that put in the power filed bankruptcy and New York State didn't recover any money.
mhm.
So this, how does this project?
But Carl, be more specific. That was the cogeneration plants.
It was, what they did was they incentivized companies essentially to go out there and produce power, which they did.
With generators, the co-generator where you had to have a host business and then you created the energy for it.
What I'm trying to do is just to make sure that we understand clearly what the process is so that we, you know, if something's incentivized up front, sometimes it's not in the end. And I just want to make sure that people understand how the project would work. How the payments would be made. It's done totally independent of New York State, which I don't know how it would be done. It might be done differently than it was done in the past. I just want to make sure that Pompey somehow isn't, I just want to make sure that we understand what the benefits are.
Well, and so there are subscriber contracts that lay out the terms. If there is a lot of oversight at the state level as well to ensure that, you know, who you say you're signing up as who's benefiting from the project, especially with the low to moderate income stuff. But yeah, it's not like, you know, it's like maybe you're thinking of supply companies too, where some of the ESCOs will sign people up at a year rate. And then a year later, if you're not watching, all of a sudden you're paying 20% more, 30% more. Not all ESCOs, but some ESCOs certainly will do that. In this case, the discount is contractual for the life of the subscription.
And you would still receive your bill from National Grid.
Right now, right, I guess that's the one pain with community solar is that there are two bills, one from grid, one from the,
Well, I think National Grid would put the provider on the bill.
well, what they're looking at coming out with soon, and I think it's imminent, is consolidated billing, where it's all on one bill. Right now, you do get two bills as a community solar.
Oh, community
subscriber.
solar, you do, yeah, okay. Because I know if you pick a different provider on National Grid,
Another ESCO, yeah.
they give you one bill that's the delivery service and the supply.
And that's the argument that solar industry has been making is, well, if you can do it for the ESCOs, why can't you do it for community solar? And supposedly there's some arcane billing thing that has been challenging, but
Yeah,
The Lafayette project that you mentioned, is that the 20 megawatt?
I don't have the details. I just was going off the news report. So
It's a real large one going in.
where in Lafayette is it? You know?
I think it's a bill or.
Any questions?
It's fine.
I know it's CDE, that's our property.
Well, I mean, today, Sue, are we here to vote on a referral? Or are we
No, this is
taking
a
information and
Preliminary.
It's just a preliminary to ask questions.
could we just talk about the sequence that would follow? Because these are for
This
referrals,
is,
right?
so in our town law, this is what we call a tier 3 solar application, and the way the law is written is applicant first comes to the town of Pompey Planning Board, presents to us, and then we make a decision or a referral of a yes or no, that we think this is a good fit. And it goes to the town board. And then the town board, then applicant would go to town board, go through the presentation. Basically, the town board's duty is at that point to decide whether that there would be a overlay zone to allow solar, because this is cited in a farm district. It is in an ag district also, but within the farm zoning, as it stands, a farm zone would not allow for a large solar array like this. With the solar overlay zone over it, it is then a permitted use and it would be applied to that parcel, but it would be basically a hearing and public hearing, and they would vote to make that zone change for that entire parcel.
Yeah, and just one
And
thing.
then it would,
ahead.
if it was approved at that point, they then come back to planning board for an official site plan review. And then that's when it would get into all the details about what it's gonna look like and how much screening and okay about the
setback and all
sheep
that,
and the
right.
setback and does fire department, the driveways, okay, are they good with that? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a long involved process, involved.
To understand the overlay, the property remains what it originally was zoned for. And then there's this overlay district they put on that for whatever period of time, it allows that usage. And then when that usage stops, it goes back to that. Like the end of my street is an overlay district for Lockheed Martin. I think they've been there since 1945. And it's still just an overlay. And the antenna facility on Sevier Road is an overlay district on agricultural land. So that's just an idea that those are what overlays are. It still remains the same underlying district, but for the purpose of adding something, that overlay allows it to happen for whatever period of time that might be. I suspect those antennas will be there for a while.
But a referral is just a referral. It's a non-binding referral.
Yeah, just-
Still do whatever it wants to do.
Right, just like we did last time, we just sent it to the town board and whatever caveats that we felt were important to add to it, and then the board makes the final decision as to whether or not grant that overlay district.
It's really. Okay. Yes, now.
No question.
Um,
Did you guys have our view shed map?
I don't.
Oh, you do now.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
I will get you.
normally at this point, we do not take public comments. This is not a public hearing, that we're weighing what our local law is and what the presentation, and we've all been given rather complete package from Gordon into that to go through and dissect and contemplate and so on.
Can that be posted?
Yeah, we have it electronically, so it can be posted on the website. Make sure that this is posted on.
That should be posted.
Can you read what that says? The question up there on the,
I'm not
I need binoculars.
Comments from Barbara Stacer, 3457 Sweet Road. This will still be 100% visible from 3 sides of my
Well,
home.
before you finish reading that, this is not a,
Yeah.
this is not a public hearing, so we don't need to read that right now. We can save that.
Way to save that.
We can save that question for the public hearing. But at this time, it's not,
But you could take a screenshot of it.
yeah, just take a screenshot of it. Thanks for that.
I mean, nobody can ask questions?
It's not a
It's
public
not-
hearing at this
it's not a
time. We're
public
just
hearing.
meeting, it's the,
That's what I'm saying. Nobody can ask questions.
No, because it's not a public.
because it's not a public hearing. It's just a time for us to meet with the applicant and determine, get the information.
Planning board does not usually have a public comment period as opposed to the town board that does. And that would be the difference. So,
Because they're gonna make the decision.
Correct.
No, just in general, I think you're talking about.
In general, yeah.
Can we ask questions that are not related to the project?
Not being on the agenda, I
it's
think
not
we
on
would
the
have to.
agenda or not. No further action is being taken this evening.
Yeah,
I make a motion to adjourn this evening.
I second the motion.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, everyone, for coming.